everybody, to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, a journey of emotional resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, and with our last journey segment of June today, I have a guest I'm excited to talk to. Looking at her Instagram posts is both awing and terrifying for me. And so I'm really excited to hear her story and what kind of took her to that, and climbing trees and being a part of nature. And I'm really excited to kind of hear that journey from where she started to where she is now. So I'd like to welcome Allison from Texas to the show. How you doing today, Allison?
I'm doing so good, escaping the heat a little bit right now.
Yeah, it's hot right now. I can't even imagine what it's like in Texas, Michigan. 80 high 80s or 90s is hot. So I can't. I'm imagine you're overheating a little bit there.
It's been some sweaty tree climbing recently. I'm not gonna lie.
I was about to say, does that affect the tree climbing when it's hotter out there?
Well, honestly, the biggest thing I realize is that there's less people outside watching me. Like, hey, what's that weirdo doing climbing that tree? It's just people don't go outside in the heat of the day. So that's the biggest thing, honestly.
Yeah. Do you before we really get into the conversation, do you get a lot of reactions from people around you or people seeing you, or even just being surprised to see you, catching a glimpse of like, that's a person up there. Do you get ever, or do you get those type of reactions while you're out doing that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, a lot of people don't even see me depending on where I'm at and what tree I'm climbing. So I just go under the radar. I should say over the radar because I'm up high. But yeah, there's definitely some people who are surprised. And then there's a lot of people who just I feel like they see and they pretend not to see because I don't know, having a reaction, like they're too cool to have a reaction or something. I don't know. They're just like either that or it really isn't a big deal to them. So
Yeah.
all kinds of different reactions.
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to kind of hear your story with you just telling me about it briefly and mentioning some things you dealt with. So kind of going into it, where do you see the importance in sharing your experiences and sharing kind of what you've been through in your life?
I think everyone's story is really important to hear as we can really relate to one another. I don't think people realize how alike we are in our struggles and how those struggles might have taken different forms, but a lot of the root cause of the things that we've dealt with, it's all been very similar. And I think it's really important to kind of shine a light on the darkness and to share that with others because the feeling of being alone in your struggle is perhaps the hardest part of the struggle itself.
Yeah, no, and I love that relation part that you mentioned. I think if we can get past all the surface level stuff that we're taught to value and put more time into and notice that we actually can connect on a deeper level, through, like you said, through those root causes of that struggle, maybe we can be a little kinder to each other and and understanding to each other in life. Um, so in your journey, where did you start noticing some challenges with your mental health? Like, kind of like where were those first instances for you where you realized something was maybe off a little bit or something wasn't quite right?
Well, all through my teenage years, I was very into disassociating. I didn't know that was what it was called at the time, but I was doing all kinds of different drugs through my teenage years, just thinking I was having a good time. But when I reflect back on that, I realized that I was really struggling with being able to cope. And yeah, that kind of followed me into my early 20s. And I think in my early 20s was when I began to realize that there was a problem with my drug use. I've had this feeling that I'm here on this earth to do something really important. That's a feeling I've had for a long time. And I began to see that the drug use was preventing me from being my best self and from accomplishing what I'm here in this world to do, which is to make positive change. So I'd say, yeah, the early 20s was when I really began to realize that my mental health was lacking and it was something I needed to work on.
Yeah, and when you first kind of got into that and using drugs, was it something that you noticed made you, maybe took away some of that in that moment, like made you disassociate? Like you said, you weren't really sure what it was, but did you just fall in love with that feeling of it and enjoy that feeling of it, or was it more just like, oh, I'm having fun right now?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, definitely both. And I mean, I had experimented with all kinds of different drugs that made me feel all kinds of different ways. I think a big piece of it was curiosity too. Maybe not just the disassociative part, but also the I wonder what that feels like. And that's still a big guiding value in my life today. I just pursue that in different ways now. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to change my state, I think was a big piece of it.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense because I remember that was like a big reason I really enjoyed drugs. I was definitely curious about other ones and how I could change my state in different ways, right? How I could change that mindset in a lot of different ways. So when you started to notice that your mental health was struggling, what was that realization for you? Was it something that happened? Was it just like were you more depressed more or inside? Were you more isolating more? Like, what was that moment where you realized, okay, yeah, there is something lacking in my life?
Hmm. I think it was just realizing the dependency that I had and also the research that I began to do when I was really in the worst part of my drug addiction. I started seeking out resources on the internet of help and what the long-term effects of this addiction would do to me, and to realize that it can mess with your brain chemistry so much that potentially you could never kind of create your own happiness molecules in your own brain without assistance. That was a really big turning point for me. The thought of, I will never be happy without this substance again if I keep doing this.
And you said you did that research kind of on your own.
Yeah, I would be high just looking it up. Um, no, yeah, it was and that phase lasted quite some time, probably about half a year of that, like back and forth of, like I need to stop this, and compiling more and more reasons to stop, to move past it.
Yeah, because I guess I never even I always use I never I never thought about that aspect of it. The brain chemistry aspect of it was very much just I needed to feel different right now. And so I think that does that's taking a big introspective look at what could come of it.
Hmm.
So as you were going through that, did you have people around you that was encouraging that use, or did you have people around you that was like, hey, Allison, maybe this is going a little far, or maybe you're going, you're straying a little bit further away than maybe what you should?
I actually didn't have a lot of people. Actually, most people in my life had no idea. Like, for instance, I was living with my mom at the time. I was like 20, 21, and she didn't even know. She was in her own little world. Parents can be very aloof. So it was really a self journey. I didn't have people telling me, hey, you need to stop this, because they didn't know what I was doing. I very much so self isolated. I wouldn't go out very much and do these drugs with other people. I would do them at home alone. So I think also that feeling of loneliness really compounded my desire to change as well. Yeah, because I just felt like I was in my own fucked up bubble, honestly.
Yeah, and so like doing it alone, did you see that as part of the problem and feeling, those feelings of loneliness like as like, okay, maybe I should look at what this is doing to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had seen a big change in myself as far as my social life, and like coming out of high school and going to all these parties and having friends, to literally just being in my room for hours and hours and days. Like, that's kind of, it's not something that makes you proud of your life, of all of this like time that you have, and how frivolously, that is a hard word to say, frivolously you are spending it. That,
Mhm.
yeah, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, no, it's a very isolating thing as you go deeper into it because like you feel those relationships slip away, you feel those connections start to slip away, and you end up by yourself a lot of the time. And so as you were like in that process of it, was there anybody you were talking to and trying to gain some more insight to getting help, or was it really just like the process of using and trying to figure it out all by yourself?
It was pretty much all by myself, actually. Yeah, I was keeping my addiction very much under the radar, and I didn't want it was something I was very ashamed about. So I wasn't telling people about it.
And nobody noticed while you were going through that?
I think definitely people noticed, but in my friend group at the time, drug use really wasn't
Mm.
something that was I mean, we all did it.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really a topic of at what point was it too much. There wasn't really a lot of actual deep compassion for one another. We were all just friends getting fucked up together. And I do think maybe my family noticed changes in me, but they didn't ever think that what I was dealing with was, as much of a problem as it really was for me.
Yeah, was there a moment then that, I know you said you were doing some research, but was there that moment that like really pushed you to say, all right, this has to change. I have to start figuring this out, or, you know, I don't know where it's going to take me.
Yeah, I wish I could say there was one pivotal moment, but it really was just this kind of buildup. I know at a point I realized I need to escape this environment. Like I had been living in the same city my whole life, and I just felt like everywhere I would go would just remind me of my old ways. And it was going to be really hard for me to get out of a habit that had been so ingrained in the setting I was in. So I actually ended up buying a one-way ticket to Maui. My friend had invited me to work on a farm there. And so that was a point where I was like, okay, like obviously I'm not taking drugs with me. So I'm going to go out there and get clean. So that was a big moment of me making a big move to move myself forward. It's literally taking myself out of the locations. So.
Yeah, was that terrifying for you to make that decision?
Yes, but at the same time, I was really freaking ready for it. Like at the
Mhm.
time, I was just fed up with myself. I think I had been trying to quit for a while, and it just was something that kept pulling me back and pulling me back. So I was also just, yeah, it was hard, obviously, and that was the first time I ever left home for an extended period of time. But I was just so ready for change at that point in my life.
Yeah, I think we hit those moments and we tried to do something like that. I tried moving multiple times. However, I ended up doing the same stuff whenever I did move. I took those same habits and behaviors, and I think that was because I wasn't quite ready for that type of change in my life. And so I would take that wherever I went. So what was that first like couple days, early weeks with that move? Did you face any maybe physical withdrawals, but the psychological withdrawals as well can be pretty intense from, when we rely on a substance to numb ourselves or take our change our state of being. Did you have any of those initial struggles like on that move?
Yeah. It's interesting because when I reflect back on that time, a lot of my memories are pretty blurry. I feel
Mhm.
like
Oh yeah.
sleep deprivation will definitely do that. No long-term storage of your memories. I do remember it being a struggle. I remember also my body really needing a lot of rest and a lot of refueling. um, but also being in such a new place, I think it was happening um, simultaneously with all of this newness. So I feel like that kind of took away from how uncomfortable that experience of quitting really was. There's all of the everything else to distract me, right? I was doing farm work and meeting all these new people, so that definitely helped alleviate it.
Yeah, no, and I think going to a place like Maui, and the beauty in that would probably be helpful as well. I went to places like South Georgia and West Virginia, so it wasn't it wasn't
Mm.
quite that setting. Although the mountains in West Virginia are very beautiful. Um, did you go in? with that mindset of trying to change everything. So not even just getting away from the drug use and those behaviors, but those underlying reasons that you were using drugs or to find healthier ways to cope. Like, did you realize that you were going to have to change more than just the drug use when you were making that move?
Still think at that point I wasn't ultra mindful of
Mm.
like mental health in general. Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say. Could you actually maybe reword that question at all?
Yeah, so like when you went into that move, did you realize maybe it took you a little bit of time of being there. Did you realize that you may have there may have been like reasons you were using those drugs and that you were going to have to find healthier ways to cope with
Mhm.
maybe those thoughts or feelings or emotions that would come out?
Mm. Yeah, at that point in my life, I still wasn't that aware of
Mm.
emotions and how to deal with them. It honestly wasn't even until just about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago where I really started realizing, oh, like these emotions, I need to learn how to deal with these. And I'm still on that journey. So, no, at that time, I was just like, I'm tearing my body up. I need to stop. This phase has to end.
So was that it for you? Were you able to stay off um the drugs and what you were using at that point, or did you ever have like any moments of relapse or any moments of like falling back or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely had moments of falling back. And it seemed like, I mean, each time was not as bad as the previous. Like I remember
Mm.
actually when I came home, I was gone for like 3 months. I came back home and I got high, but it was like it wasn't something that then consumed my life. It was something I'd be like, okay, I'll do a little bit and then take a week off. And so, and it was like this tapering. I think the change of setting was really helpful to stop, but it wasn't a cold turkey thing. It was still took me a while to um, really be able to find that strength in myself, and also I ended up finding something to replace the
Mm.
drug use with.
Yeah, and anytime you picked up, did you ever like were you ever hard on yourself for those moments, or did you like kind of just see that as your process in in changing and figuring out more about yourself? What were those moments of going back for you like?
Mm. I don't know. I mean, I think I definitely just convinced myself that I was stronger at that point and that I
Mm.
had the willpower to keep it under control. And I think also it just really started affecting my body more. And so it was feeling, the aftermath of the drug use and how
Sure.
much crappier it made me feel.
Mhm.
Um, I think that made me really realize the toll it was taking on my body. But I, obviously would feel down on myself for having, relapsed. But I would definitely go forward having learned something from each time and kind of how to better deal with the stresses moving forward.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it, right? Is dealing with the
Yeah.
stressors or the things that trigger us to want to use as we continue to grow through that. So you had just mentioned that you found something to replace it. So what did that look like for you? What was it that you found that you could replace it with? And then what was that process like of falling in love with that?
Yeah, it's really an interesting story that I'm excited to share because I replaced it with fitness. And I feel like, the fitness industry is just so grandiose and everyone's like, wow, look at all these people doing all these amazing things, but it's a slippery slope. I mean, like if you're just replacing one addiction for another, in my case, drugs for exercise, I was doing it in an unhealthy way, in a way in which I was still disassociating. Um, and in my mind at the time, of course, I didn't realize what I was doing. I thought that I was going to correct all the damage that I had done on my body. That was my pursuit. Is I have been putting my body through the ringer, and now let me be the most fit person possible. But I was new to fitness, and so I was really overdoing it. I was doing a lot of high intensity training and was, counting my calories and was already in a really kind of deprived state, having come off of drug addiction. So, in retrospect, that was a horrible decision. But in my mind, I thought I was doing great.
Yeah, it's tricky when you replace it with something that is supposed to be healthy, right? Where you
Yeah.
think it's something that's really good for you. Because I did the same thing where I got really into working out when I first got clean. After a few months, and I kind of settled. I got really into that, and it almost became that same obsessiveness where, like, oh, I feel like I have to do this, or I'm going to be in a
Hmm.
bad mood, or I'm going to be off, or and then I was probably doing it too much, and I would that would just be the priority, and it would only be that. And if I didn't do it, it would throw me off, just like with drugs. And so it's always a weird battle when it's something healthy, right? So, like, where did you start seeing those unhealthy signs for you in fitness?
Yeah. I mean, I lost my period for like a year. It was just gone. They call that the female athlete triad whenever your body is experiencing so much stress, and that can be in many different forms. In my case, it was, under fueling and overtraining. That my reproductive system just shut down. And it's like, well, this is a state of famine. This is a stressful environment. We can't, it's not a place to bring a child into the world. So initially I thought, hey, this is cool. Like, who the hell wants a period? Um, but but then there is all these other symptoms of hormone imbalance that I began to see in my body, like losing hair and just getting really bad acne, my energy levels. And so then like any millennial does, took to the internet and started researching all this stuff. And yeah, and I realized I had a problem that needed to be fixed.
Was it for the fitness aspect of it for you? Was it trying to look a certain way, or was it just replacing that addiction for something else? Or were you trying to, be happy or be satisfied with what you were looking at in the mirror?
It was definitely fueled a lot by body image for sure. I think, and actually, I'm just kind of making this connection as we're talking about. That's why I love conversations like this, is because it kind of
Hmm.
helps you understand your own story a little better. But I think my self confidence had taken such a hit from the drug use, of just feeling so ashamed of myself, and that, I was hiding myself in a very literal sense from the world, that I wanted to I was chasing confidence and validation, validation from other people. And I thought that I would get that from my appearance, so trying to make my body look what I thought it should look like and what others would appreciate.
That's a it's a really tough thing to chase, that validation, and wanting that from other people. And I can relate to that. Just like I played soccer growing up, and I didn't look like the average soccer player. I wasn't skinny and or anything like that, and so I had some body image issues as well. And that was a big part of it, because I felt so ashamed. Like you just said, I felt so ashamed of myself coming out of that drug use, of like, just doing all these terrible things. And so I wanted to hear people say good things about me. I had heard so many bad things about me for so long, right? I wanted to show something that people would say something positive to me right away.
Mhm.
And so then it's such a hard thing to get rid of and to let go of. So as you were going through that process of realizing that, um, did you just give up the fitness? Did you have to start finding a different way to cope? Or how did you kind of start, you know, dealing with that in a positive way, and changing from that?
Yeah, well, obviously for a body that is really deprived, I began to have food issues where I would like binge on food because my body just needed calories so much. And I, whenever I looked up kind of how to heal from this, the way that you heal from over exercise and under eating is by stop exercising and eat more. And that was a really big problem for me. Like I felt like I was having an identity crisis because I suddenly had identified myself so strongly as the gym girl, like the one who's fit and working out, and that was kind of my life at that point. And in order to get healthy, I had to stop exercising and put on weight. And that just kind of made my body image issues much worse. And so then that has been a journey in it of itself. And I would, after I, had kind of was able to get my period back, I kept reintroducing exercise in a way that just wasn't healthy. It was kind of like relapsing, because
Mm.
but it's different than drugs because exercise is a healthy thing. And like, I mean, food is a healthy thing, and it's all about finding this balance. And I feel like honestly the journey that happened after my drug addiction, with food and exercise, I feel like was even harder than the drug addiction, to be honest. Because it's you can't live without those things really. So
Eh,
I
That's a
forget what your question is. I just went
no,
off.
no, no. That was no, that was really insightful because I think it just like you said, it shows that balance is so important with anything, whether it's good or bad, but to have a problem with something that you actually need or something that can be good for you almost can make that a little bit harder, where just like giving up alcohol, that can be a little bit harder because it's socially acceptable and it's out there a little bit easier. You can go into the store and buy it, whereas like I was on heroin for so long, it was just I wasn't around it at all anymore, and it's not like you need heroin to for you to live. So I didn't have to worry about that aspect of it. But finding that balance is such a hard thing when it comes to being healthy, not only physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. All those things we try to be healthy in. Um, so were you kind of processing that by yourself, like internally, or you know, did you ever like seek help, whether that was in some form of therapy or just like, talking to somebody and saying like, saying some of those thoughts that you were feeling or dealing with out loud?
Yeah, I feel like almost all of my struggle up until the very kind of, I don't know, within the last few years, to be honest, has been by myself alone. Like I also at a point had really adopted this positivity mindset. Like when I was in my early 20s, I started reading a bunch of self-help books and the whole fake it till you make it type thing. And I really began to exude positivity. Like, even if I was feeling sad, I'd be like, okay, like, let's just smile, because a smile on your face is going to release all the serotonin and then I'll just be happy. And I was just really ignoring my problems. And I really felt a lot of friction against showing anything that wasn't a positive portrayal of myself to other people.
Mhm.
So I found it really hard to even tell my family, and close friends about what was going on because I couldn't let them see me be not okay or not just the happy, bubbly Allison that they know. That's still something that I'm working through. It's hard, but realizing that it's okay to not be okay is an important lesson, but a continual path.
Yeah, and oh man, just like I feel for that, and not being able to feel like you can say you were struggling, and what you just explained, like the positivity and feeling like you have to be this certain image that you show your family and your friends, and
Hmm.
not wanting to show them struggle. Was there I mean, I guess kind of like a rock bottom moment in addiction. What could be? Was there a moment where like you did finally? I know you said you recently started doing that in the last few years, but like that first time you just let some of that shit out and told somebody like, this is what I'm going through. This is what I've been dealing with. Was there a moment where, you did finally let some of that out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I let my mom know before anyone else, because obviously, your parents can be one of the biggest sources of support, and also someone that I trust to have unconditional love for me, where I didn't feel like no matter what I would say, it's not like they're gonna, my mom's just gonna say, okay, like, I don't love you anymore. So I did let my mom know, um, and I think at a point too, I just was really leaning into the fact that I didn't have anything to be ashamed over. That when I really reflected on my story and on the kind of sequence of events, how much kind of sense it made that I had gotten to where I had gotten, I realized that, yeah, this is just a shitty situation that I found myself in, and it's not my fault. Yeah.
Was that hard to convince yourself not to be ashamed of, dealing with addiction and dealing with, just the body image issues and, maybe those internal struggles? Was it a struggle in itself to say, hey, don't be ashamed of this?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, as much as I'd like to say don't have any shame over it currently, I know in this logical, when I think about it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed of, but it still feels icky on a deeper level. Like, I don't know. I've really been kind of working through that. Um, I don't know, trying to bring up how I actually feel inside up to where I I can logically understand a concept, if that makes any sense, right? Like, I logically understand there's no shame, but I still feel it. And how do I get that feeling to portray what I know to be true?
Uh, I really like what you just said because it's so real in that process, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we look at that healing process and we think, oh, we deal with something, we're good, we're okay, we don't gotta worry about it anymore. It's done. It's in the past. Whatever. I'm almost 9.5 years clean and sober, and I still
Mm.
have that exact same thing that you just described. Like I know I shouldn't, I've come to accept some of the things that happened. I've come to accept some of the things I do feel shame over. But I still get those moments where I'm like, it still just feels so heavy, right? It feels like such a heavy burden when those thoughts come back into your head. And so that healing journey is a process, right? It's
Yeah.
it's yeah, go ahead.
I think conversations like this is really helpful in that healing process of being able to candidly and openly talk about the things that you struggled with,
Mhm.
because I think it's like the hiding it that makes it, like, fuels the shame, or the shame fuels the hiding it. It's like this cycle, and I think the more we can just talk about our experience openly, it just makes the darkness a little bit lighter. We've got flashlights right now, and we're just shining it. And I think every conversation helps to pull back a layer of shame.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really important, and you might have said it before we started recording, but it was people may look at what you post and what you do and think, oh, you're just a happy, go lucky, everything's always been good, you're a hippie climbing trees and life must be great, and but you have this this journey that's gotten you there, right? It hasn't just been like, you were born and you started climbing trees and that's been your life ever since. It was something that took you there. And I think when you can have that conversation, you know we, like, even us, there's things we can relate on. And whenever you talk to somebody and you go past the surface level stuff and go into that deeper connection, you realize like, oh, you know, you've struggled too. Oh, you've dealt with that pain too. And I think that's what we're missing at times to like fully heal and keep growing in our lives, is because we do want to hide that. We do want to, you know, we don't want people to judge us based off what we've been through or what's happened. So we kind of keep it inside. And then that's where, like you mentioned earlier, I think we feel those feelings of loneliness and that we're alone in that struggle. So, you know, was there a process to you finding the tree climbing thing, you know, as part of your journey? Was it something that maybe you did actually used to do when you were younger and it came back out? But like, you know, how did that kind of come into your journey of you know, healing with the nature and the tree climbing and stuff like that?
Yeah, wonderful question. I didn't grow up I didn't grow up climbing trees. Like people must think like, oh, you must have had woods right behind your house and you were just out there. Like when I lived in a city suburb, like it was so you know, there was some trees in my front yard. I would climb them every now and then, but I wasn't always up there. I think my love of nature really began to take hold when I was at a community college here in Austin. So I had come back from Maui and was starting to kind of get my life together and figure out what I wanted to do. And I took a course called Native Plants. And we were out identifying plants, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like, I know that species of tree and that tree and that tree. And from there, I just really wanted to follow my love of nature. So I ended up leaving for an indefinite period of time, again, kind of like whenever I left for Maui. But this time it was to explore the country's national parks. And that I spent about 9 months living on the road and really feel like found myself during that time, and also really found this passion inside of me for nature, really. And at that time it wasn't necessarily trees. I really loved trees and felt pulled to them, but I didn't know what to do with that. So the tree love has just kind of grown. I don't know, there's been this intrinsic, the best I can explain it is pull, you know, like your intuition, whenever it's pulling you towards something, or sometimes it's even pushing you away from a place. It's been this pull that has taken me there, and I've followed it all around, discovering rainforest canopy ecology. I went to school for it, and then working in tree care, you know, doing arborist work, all kinds of stuff. And I'm still figuring out what to do with my tree love, to be honest. Right now, I'm just enjoying it and sharing
Yeah,
it.
no. And it's cool because you know, right when you start talking about that, you can see that and you can hear that in your voice, and that's always a really
My
cool thing.
cheeks are
Yeah, that's always a really cool thing to me, is when somebody talks about something they're passionate about and they enjoy, and you see that in them, like you see the, you know, the little bit of a change in what we've been talking about, and then you know we get to that part and you're like, oh yeah, you know, let's talk
yeah,
about it, and
yeah,
I find that to be really something cool. To see that in people, because passion is something you love, and finding passion in something can be a really tough thing in this life, and so it's really cool when you can find it.
yeah.
But just on that journey and leaving again and going on that road trip basically to national parks and stuff, did you ever hit moments where you're like, oh, what am I doing? I should be going back and, you know, live in this conventional, you know, I should go back and graduate. I should go back and get a job. I should go back and do this. Like, did you ever battle with that? Like, this is what you're supposed to do in life, or did you really just embrace and go with what you were doing?
Yeah, I don't feel like I've been too affected by societal norms. Like, I don't,
Mm.
it wasn't a big issue for me. I didn't feel like I was living life wrong. Like, I thought, you know, I was having an adventure and that's what life was about. Um, yeah, yeah,
I love that. Yeah, because you know, I think that's what it should be. I think people can get too sidetracked with what we feel like we're supposed to do, instead of chasing our passions, instead of taking a chance on ourselves and trying to find something we love.
Mm.
So that's a really cool thing to be able to do, and then feel free in doing so, right? Um, so is there we talked about balance. So is there a balance to, your passion for nature? Do you have to find a balance for it? Or is it something that just flows really well with the flow of your life right now?
I'd say in the context of nature and my passion for it, honestly, what's been the most challenging finding balance is the fact that I believe deeply that these passions that I have are meant to be shared, but also they're meant to be my career. Like I think that the thing that I do to make money is also the thing that I love the most. And it's just that, again, that kind of intuitive feeling that I have. And it does get really weird whenever you start trying to monetize passions.
Mhm.
Like that's the balance I'm currently trying to find where, how can I offer value and services and help connect people with nature, but then also make money from it. So that's kind of that's a path that I'm on currently.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be a tricky thing, right? Because
Mhm.
you have to balance your love with it for the practicality of just being able to live, right? I mean, that's part of it. And then to your point, I think when you can do something you love and be able to live, the life you want to, with being able to eat or have a house, or, however you want to live in that aspect, when you can use your passions to fund that or pay for that, then you're probably doing something right, instead of doing something that
Mhm.
you absolutely hate to have things that maybe you don't even necessarily want.
I just can't. Like, I don't know. I just can't feel a sense of dread 5 days out of the week. I just can't. Like, that's not is not something I will tolerate. I need to feel like the work that I do is fulfilling, that it's meaningful, and that, it's something that I really enjoy. And that I'm affecting other people's lives in a positive way with. That's yeah, that's like an absolute necessity for me.
I think that's really special. And I guess I just want to go back just a little bit, graduating high
Mhm.
school, or getting out of high school, and starting your life out in that way. Um, was that, was there ever an option to go that path for you? Or were you always that mindset of, I'm not going to take this route because I just cannot do it? Or were you, that early age where we're supposed to be figuring out life, right? And supposed
Mhm.
to be, having our plans for the future. Did you have that back then? Or was it always just like, I am going to find something I love before I settle for something that I don't want to do, just to get through life?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I mean, I do remember kind of being set up on a very traditional path. I mean, I did early college start. So, like my senior year in high school, I was already taking college classes, even though I was doing really poorly on them because I wasn't taking my academics too seriously at that time. And then right after high school, I went to community college and got my associate's degree. So I was kind of like, yeah, this is what we do. We graduate high school, we go to college. But yeah, I don't know. But I never really felt called to I don't know, kind of traditional job, like a 9 to 5 type thing. And I do think that some of the classes that I was taking at community college, and I realized my love of nature, like I just felt like that was something that was worth pursuing. But also I felt like I didn't know who the hell I was. And I felt that to be a pretty important um first step before deciding what to do for the rest of my life.
I think that's probably some really good advice for young people, especially, to kind of realize, finding out who you are and who you want to be is so important, to figure out what you want to do and how
Mhm.
you want to spend your life. I think that is really important, and sometimes can get lost in that time frame. Um, but with that, like where are you at in your internal journey right now, and healing from some of those past things? Like, do you feel like you're in a really positive spot and you're taking those steps every day? Do you feel like you're still kind of struggling through it? Like, where do you feel like you're at today with that journey of it?
It's very much so still a journey for me. And I feel like I have more awareness than I ever have before about myself and about these kind of coping mechanisms that have just basically morphed into different things for as long as I can remember. And so I think it's very challenging to change these ingrained habitual disassociative behaviors. That's what it's been for me, that you've had since you were a child. So I can definitely say that I don't have everything figured out. I'm still learning what I need at any given moment and how to give myself that in a healthy way. I'm still learning how to handle uncomfortable emotions. Like I still haven't dialed in like what's the best thing to do, but I mean I do know that being out in nature is one of the most healing things for me, that getting in touch with my body, like in a like that that kind of finding of the flow state, I know is really healing for me. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to climb a tree every day for a year. I started that January 1st. And honestly, I think I'm just going to keep going for as long as I can, because it's been such a stellar way to, yeah, be embodied, to check in with how I'm feeling, to get that nature time, to get the movement, because I know all of those things are so, so important for my mental health. And there can be no excuse to not do it, right? Of like, oh, this weather's bad. I can't take care of my mental health today. It's like, no, it's raining. You got to take care of your mental health.
Yeah, that's probably the best time that you have to
Exactly.
take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the most important days to do something about it. But
Right.
I think that's a really awesome thing is, and I think we're always on that journey. I think if we ever get to a point, well, I mean, I've gotten to that point where I've stopped working on things, and I just felt like, okay, I'm good. I've been doing this long enough. Like, I don't have to keep up with certain things anymore. And like that just smacked me in the face and put me in a really, really miserable, depressive state for a good bit of time, even having so much clean time and being sober and going through all that. And so I think
Mm.
we're always on that journey, right? We're always in that process of dealing with uncomfortable emotions, dealing with life and learning new ways to cope with it. Because something I did early recovery, I'm not going to do that today. I've had to find a new way to kind of deal with that, right? Because we're always growing and doing different things. So I think understanding you're on that journey is a good place to be, and understanding there's always going to be work to do until the day we move on.
Yeah.
So climbing a tree every day for a year. You've been doing that for what? We're almost 7 months in.
Yeah. I mean, I've been tracking it on Instagram with the daily story post, because I do
Hmm.
find accountability can be so helpful with starting a new habit or of just doing something positive for yourself. It's interesting how we'll do that for um, for others. But yeah, today's going to be day, I keep looking at my watch, 176. It'll be day 176. Yeah, I've been doing it we're like almost halfway through the year,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Is that 176 different trees? Or do you got one tree you go back to sometimes?
Yeah, I don't find a different tree every day, because I actually think that there's value to returning to the same tree, not only in this kind of physical sense of like, oh, my body knows this tree and I can learn how to move on it and be a little more comfortable, but also I've been really establishing these relationships with these trees. I mean, like I have names for them, and they have their own energy about them. It's been interesting to return. I mean, sit spots, for instance, that is a kind of ritual, a daily activity that Native Americans have done that's been, going out into nature and just sitting in the same spot that you go to frequently and noticing how it changes. Like how does it change through the seasons and the animals that frequent that area. It's just you you really get on a deeper level with that being. It's kind of like the difference of, if you meet a stranger, it's like, oh, but just small talk. You don't really actually get to know them versus somebody, a good friend that you're you're with all the time, and you really are able to go deeper because of that familiarity that you have with each other.
Yeah, and that's a cool way to look at that and have those different relationships and experiences with certain parts of nature. And I know you when we were talking about setting this up, you had mentioned you had gone on vacation. Is it harder to find a tree when you're in a new area or in a new setting to like, all right, going up and climbing that, like, what has that been a little bit, is that harder to do than knowing like your area and your environment?
Totally. I mean, anybody who's traveled to a foreign country knows that kind of feeling of nervousness, where like you're an outsider, and like maybe you don't know the language, and or you just don't want to draw attention to yourself because you already kind of feel like like how a lot of attention is being brought to you. And then climbing a tree and filming yourself doing it is honestly honestly, when I started, I used to have this big hang up on filming myself in public. It was something that I had to work through because it made me uncomfortable. And whenever you travel and do it, like, oh my gosh, yeah, honestly, that's been the hardest part of just, okay, I'm just gonna sit on my tripod and climb this tree in the middle of this park, and so it feels really kind of vulnerable. But whenever
Yeah,
I
I
come
could,
down with
I
the
could
tree, I'm like,
imagine.
yes.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten people to go like climb with you, or you ever had any like fun interactions with just somebody passing by in that moment? Any interactions that stick out a little bit more?
Mm, mm. I mean, there's like quite how like these ones that keep coming to mind that I can't decide between which ones. Um, I mean, I've definitely like met somebody on a hike when I was in the UK, and inevitably, if people talk to me for long enough, I end up talking about trees, climbing them. So I ended up just taking this random person up into a tree with me, and that was really cool because he thought I was joking or something. Um,
Until you did it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And also just startling people and people saying, "Hey, I thought you were a big bird up there," and just being really thrown off. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and all just the little kind of wholesome interactions.
And I would imagine that would be pretty cool about what you do as well. Just like having those moments too with different people, because that could definitely strike up a quick conversation or a quick interaction with somebody, which I think is always a fun little thing, even if it doesn't seem very big. Having a quick little interaction with a stranger can be a lot of fun and a cool moment. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so just real quick question: you ever dropped your tripod or phone once you got up and settled into the tree?
Like only once actually. I When I'm in
Okay.
a tree, I am very, very mindful of my body. I feel like my proprioception is just on high alert. So I mean, when I have my phone in my hands, I'm really being intentional about holding on to it. There was only one tree that I dropped my phone from, and that's because I was on a really low limb, so I wasn't really being super
Mm.
mindful because the risk level was pretty low. But with the higher risk situations, I am fully present. So hence, I don't drop anything and I don't fall myself.
Yeah, that's always a good thing to be able to
Mhm.
keep doing that. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Just hearing some of the things you went through, and then being able to to see you talk about your passion. Because, like I
Yeah.
said, I always think that's a really cool thing to see somebody talk about something they love and what that does for them. Because I think
Yeah.
if we can find that as we go through life, it can give us so much more meaning and purpose to why we're here. and what we're doing. And I think that's a really special thing, to be able to talk to somebody else. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that and talking about what you love and where you have found healing and growth in your life.
Mhm.
Um, and I always like, letting the person I'm speaking with have the kind of last word, whether it's some words of inspiration or advice or just a final thought, or just something to close us out on and end our conversation with.
Yeah. Right now, my biggest thing is following joy and curiosity. I think getting in touch with that kind of playful side of yourself, whenever you experience something that lights you up from the inside out. Like when I spoke about trees, there was this joy and this light, and I really think so many things in your life will just unravel in a beautiful way if you find those things that bring you that innate joy and pursue them to no end. Yeah.
I think that's what we should all try to do in life and
Hmm.
strive to in life. I think that's where we find happiness. So again, Allison, thank you so much for joining today. I really, really appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I'm gonna put your link for your Instagram in the description, so some everybody go check it out. Definitely, check out the height Allison is getting in the trees. Check out the messaging she has, and some of the cool things that I've seen that you have found and spotted in trees and from trees while you've been doing it. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, this was a wonderful conversation. It went deep and dark, and then it came up, and now I'm feeling good.
That's the best way to end it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I
To
do
end
I
it.
do appreciate that was probably intentional on your part. Like, okay,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
be lighthearted here to finish.
Always take it to that fun, happy ending
Yeah,
at the end
it's
of
great.
it. So again, thank you. I've enjoyed it. It's been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.
See ya.